Fiona Hale stood in the sacred bonding circle under the harvest moon, her heart full of 3 years of hope. Tonight, before the assembled packs of her territory, Kale, her fated mate and her childhood friend who'd risen to beta, would finally claim her. She'd felt their bond since she was 16, a golden thread that pulsed with warmth whenever he was near. When Kale called her name and she stepped into the circle, the entire Moonshadow pack watching with anticipation, she believed her life of quiet obscurity was finally ending. Instead, Kale looked at her with cold calculation and spoke words that shattered her soul. "I reject this bond as a mistake of fate. You, Fiona Hale, are unworthy of the position I will hold." The bond didn't just break, it was ripped from her spirit like tearing muscle from bone. As she collapsed in agony, Kale turned to her half-sister Rhiannon, performing the bonding ritual with her instead. The packs roared approval. Rhiannon's eyes gleamed with triumph. Fiona's world went black. But an ancient, terrifying power had witnessed this desecration. The legendary Lycan King Silas Greymark stepped from the shadows, his amber eyes blazing with rage. When his gaze met Fiona's dying one, a bond older than wolf magic exploded between them. The rejected wolf was about to become a queen. Chapter 1. The harvest moon hung low and impossibly large over the sacred bonding grounds, bathing the ancient clearing in silver light that seemed almost alive. Fiona Hale stood among the gathered wolves, her heart thundering so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. 3 years. 3 years since she'd first felt the golden thread connecting her to Kale. 3 years of waiting for this exact moment. The air itself seemed to pulse with magic and anticipation, thick enough to taste. Sacred fires blazed in ceremonial braziers around the clearing's perimeter, their flames dancing in colors that had no name: blue-white, silver-green, gold that seemed to breathe. The assembled packs of their territory filled the space with expectant energy, wolves from a dozen bloodlines witnessing the ancient ritual. This wasn't just a bonding ceremony. This was destiny made manifest. At the center of the circle stood Kale, and Fiona's breath caught despite having seen him 1,000 times before. He wore the ceremonial leather of a beta in training, dark and perfectly fitted, marking his rising status. His posture radiated command, confidence that seemed to make him larger than life. The firelight caught the sharp planes of his face, and for a moment, she could barely believe he was hers. That the bond thrumming between them would finally, tonight, be made real before the goddess and their people. Somewhere in the crowd, Fiona knew her half-sister Rhiannon watched. She'd caught glimpses of her earlier, stunning as always in deep crimson, her dark hair cascading like silk, her expression strangely satisfied. But Fiona pushed thoughts of her sister away. Tonight wasn't about comparisons or the shadow Rhiannon had always cast. Tonight was about the bond, about Kale, about everything finally beginning. The pack elder raised his arms, and silence fell like a physical weight. Ancient words in the old tongue rolled across the clearing, calling upon the moon goddess to bless the bonds being formed tonight. Fiona's fingers trembled. The golden thread in her chest pulled taut, warm and certain. Then Kale's voice rang out, clear and commanding. Fiona Hale. Her name. He'd called her name. The crowd parted before her like water, creating a path to the sacred circle's center. Her legs moved without conscious thought, carrying her forward through the gauntlet of watching eyes. She barely saw them. Her entire world had narrowed to Kale, standing in that circle of firelight, waiting for her. She stepped across the boundary, felt the ancient magic prickle across her skin. The sacred circle recognized her, accepted her. She was meant to be here. The bond sang with certainty. Standing before Kale, Fiona looked up into the face she'd memorized long ago. But something was wrong. His expression was too composed, too controlled. His eyes held none of the warmth she'd expected, none of the joy that should mirror her own. They were distant, calculating, cold. I've waited so long for this, she whispered, searching his face for the connection she knew was there, had to be there. Cale's jaw tightened. His eyes went colder still, amber hardening to stone. When he opened his mouth to speak, his voice carried across the entire clearing with brutal clarity. Chapter 2. I reject this bond as a mistake of fate. The words hit Viana like a physical blow, but the true agony came a heartbeat later. The golden thread in her chest, the one that had pulsed with warmth and certainty for 3 years, didn't simply break. It was ripped away, torn from the very fabric of her soul with the violence of muscle being shredded from bone. Viana's scream died in her throat as white-hot pain exploded through her entire being, metaphysical and terrible, unlike anything the physical world could inflict. Cale's voice continued, cold and formal, as if he were delivering a military report rather than destroying a life. She lacks the strength required of a beta's mate. She lacks the status, the presence, the power I need at my side. Each word was a surgical cut, precise and devastating. Viana Hale is unsuitable for the position I will hold. The world tilted violently. Colors drained to ash gray. Sounds became muffled and distant, as if she were drowning. Viana's knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the sacred ground, hands clutching at her chest where the bond had been torn away, leaving only a gaping void that screamed with its absence. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. There was only the howling emptiness where destiny had lived. Gasps rippled through the assembled packs, shock giving way to uncomfortable murmurs. She heard them as if from underwater, fragments of agreement, whispers of he's right and she's too ordinary, and the beta needs someone stronger. The humiliation of it crashed over her in waves. Every wolf in the territory was watching her break, watching her sprawled helpless in the dirt like something discarded. Through her blurred vision, she caught movement in the honored observer's circle. A figure stood apart from the others, tall and unnaturally still. Even through her agony, Viana felt the weight of his gaze, ancient, powerful, burning with something she couldn't name. Silas Greymark. The Lycan King himself had witnessed her destruction. The shame of it made her want to disappear, to simply cease existing. Why? The word tore from her throat, broken and desperate. She looked up at Cale, searching for any trace of the male she'd thought she knew, the one the bond had promised her. Why? Cale's expression didn't change. No regret, no hesitation, nothing but cold calculation in those amber eyes that had once looked at her with something she'd mistaken for affection. He stepped closer, towering over her crumpled form, and spoke loud enough for every witness to hear. Because you were never enough, Viana. You were never going to be enough. The words struck her like a death blow, and for a moment, she wished they were. The void in her chest expanded, threatening to swallow her whole. She was nothing. She had been nothing all along, and the bond, the one certainty in her life, had been the cruelest lie fate had ever told. Then Cale turned away from her with decisive finality, his shoulders squared with purpose. His gaze swept across the crowd and stopped, fixing on a point with unmistakable intent. Viana followed his line of sight, some masochistic impulse forcing her to witness what came next. He was looking at Rhiannon. And her sister, beautiful, confident, perfect Rhiannon, was smiling. Chapter 3. Cale crossed the sacred circle with deliberate, measured steps, each one a nail in the coffin of everything Viana had believed. The crowd parted before him, a ripple of confusion and dawning understanding spreading through the assembled packs. He moved with the certainty of someone executing a plan, not the hesitation of someone making an impulsive choice. Rhiannon stood waiting, and that was what broke something else inside Viana. Her sister wasn't surprised. There was no shock in those beautiful features, no uncertainty in her posture. Only the satisfied curve of a smile that spoke of patience rewarded, of a scheme come to fruition. She'd known. She'd known this was coming. Cale stopped before Rhiannon, and the pack elder stumbled through the words of the bonding ritual with barely concealed confusion. This wasn't how sacred ceremonies were meant to proceed. But Kale was the future beta, and power had its own rules. He took Rhiannon's wrist, his teeth finding the delicate skin there with possessive certainty. Blood welled, dark and damning in the firelight. Rhiannon didn't flinch. She tilted her head back, offering her throat with the grace of someone who'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. The bite. The blood. The oath spoken in the old tongue, binding them before the moon goddess and every witness present. "This is my chosen mate," Kale declared, his arms sliding around Rhiannon's waist with easy possession. "Worthy of standing beside a beta. Worthy of the status and power our pack requires." A heartbeat of hesitation hung in the air, the pack teetering on the edge of sacred law and political reality. Then someone cheered. Another joined. Like a dam breaking, the applause spread, approval washing over the clearing. Power trumped destiny. Ambition conquered the goddess's will. They were choosing this, validating this desecration with their voices. Over Kale's shoulder, Rhiannon's eyes found Viana's. The look in them was pure triumph, vicious and complete. Her lips moved, forming words only Viana could read in the firelight. "Did you really think he'd choose you?" The double betrayal crashed over Viana like a tidal wave. Her mate, the one fate had promised her, and her sister, her own blood, had destroyed her together. This hadn't been impulse or cruel chance. It had been planned, orchestrated, executed with the precision of a military strike. How long had they been conspiring? How many of her hopeful smiles had they laughed at in private? How thoroughly had she been the fool? The void in her chest expanded violently, devouring what remained of her consciousness. The world grayed further, sounds becoming distant echoes. She was dying, she realized dimly. The bond severing was killing her, and some part of her welcomed it. Better to fade into nothing than exist in this nightmare. Darkness crept in from the edges of her vision, merciful and final. She felt herself falling, not just physically but spiritually, tumbling into an abyss that promised oblivion. The cheering faded. The fires dimmed. Everything was slipping away. Then a sound cut through the encroaching darkness, a growl so deep and ancient it seemed to come from the earth itself. It reverberated through the clearing, through her bones, through the very air. Power rolled over the assembly like thunder made tangible, primal and terrifying and absolute. As consciousness finally abandoned her, Viana's last thought was confusion. That sound hadn't come from any wolf. It had come from a king. Chapter 4. The celebration died as if someone had cut the throat of sound itself. Silas Greymark's power rolled over the assembly like an avalanche, crushing and absolute. Wolves dropped to their knees with bone-jarring force, unable to resist the primal dominance that demanded submission. Even the alphas, proud, powerful leaders of their packs, found themselves bowing, foreheads pressed to the earth, necks bared in instinctive deference. Silas emerged from the honored observer's circle, and Viana, hovering at the edge of death, felt the displacement of air, the weight of his presence like gravity itself had shifted. Through her failing vision, she saw him, tall and leonine, moving with predatory grace that spoke of centuries, not decades. This was legend made flesh, myth stepping into the firelight. His eyes blazed amber gold, burning with a rage so pure it seemed to set the air around him aflame. They fixed on Viana's crumpled form with an intensity that should have incinerated her. But there was something else in that gaze, something that looked like recognition, like fury on her behalf. "You dare." His voice was thunder and winter, each word a judgment. "You dare commit this desecration before me?" Kale tried to rise, to speak, but the weight of Silas's dominance slammed him back down. No one moved. No one breathed. The Lycan King's fury was a living thing, and they were all trapped in its path. "You reject a fated bond," Silas continued, each word precise and cutting, "and in the same breath, in the same circle, before the same witnesses, you dare to bond another? This is sacrilege. This is a direct insult to the moon goddess herself." Viana barely heard the words. She was slipping away, the void in her chest consuming her piece by piece. But then a scent cut through her fading consciousness. Winter stone and ancient cedar, dark power wrapped in something that felt impossibly safe. It anchored her, kept her from falling completely into oblivion. The ground trembled with footsteps. Through her blurred vision, she saw Silas kneel in the dirt beside her. A king. An immortal being of legend. Brought low to be at her level. His hand, large and scarred with centuries of battle, cupped her face with unexpected gentleness. "Open your eyes," he commanded, and his voice bypassed every failing system in her body, resonating directly in her mind, her soul. "Look at me." Viana's eyes fluttered open against her will, pulled by a force greater than death itself. She met his gaze, amber gold and burning, ancient and knowing, seeing her in a way no one ever had. The connection hit like lightning striking the earth. The king's bond exploded between them with cataclysmic force. It was nothing like the gentle golden thread she'd shared with Kale. This was blue gold fire, ancient and absolute, a supernova of destiny that obliterated everything in its path. The broken, bleeding wound where Kale's bond had been was incinerated instantly, cauterized and replaced by something infinitely more powerful. Power flooded through Viana, his power, their power, something awakening deep in her bloodlines that had been dormant for generations. The void in her chest filled with blazing light. Her dying body surged back to life, cells regenerating, spirit reconstituting itself around this new, terrifying connection. Silas's eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of surprise on his otherwise controlled features. "Impossible," he breathed, but his hand tightened on her face, possessive and certain. "No, not impossible. Inevitable." The world came back into sharp focus, colors returning in vivid clarity, sounds crystalline and pure. Viana gasped, truly breathing for the first time since the rejection. And felt everything. Chapter 5. Blue gold energy poured through Viana like a river of liquid starlight, flooding every cell, every fiber of her being. The tear in her soul, that gaping, screaming wound where Kale's bond had been ripped away, sealed itself under the onslaught of ancient power. This wasn't healing. This was resurrection, transformation, becoming something she'd never been meant to be under Moonshadow's limited sky. "She's mine by right." Kale's voice shattered the silence, desperation cracking through his earlier cold control. He tried to rise, to move toward them. Silas didn't even look at him. A wave of power exploded outward, invisible but devastating, and Kale was thrown backward like a leaf in a hurricane. He crashed into the crowd, wolves scattering to avoid him. "She is mine by destiny," Silas said, his voice resonating with absolute authority. He pulled Viana upright effortlessly, supporting her as strength returned to her legs. "Mine by ancient law. Mine by right of the goddess who wove this bond before either of us drew breath." His amber eyes blazed as he finally looked at Kale. "You threw her away like refuse. You have no right. You have nothing." Silas turned back to Viana, his hand sliding to cup the back of her neck, thumb tracing her racing pulse. "You are mine," he said, softer now, meant only for her. "Do you accept this bond? Do you accept me?" Through the haze of power and shock, Viana felt the question's weight. He was giving her choice, even as destiny burned between them. She looked into those ancient amber eyes and found something she'd never seen in Kale's, true recognition. He saw her. All of her. "Yes," she whispered. Silas's eyes flared with fierce satisfaction. Then he lowered his head to her throat, and, before the entire assembly, before every pack and witness, he bit down. The claiming bite was possession and promise, ancient magic binding them in ways that transcended any wolf bond. Viana gasped as power erupted from the point where his teeth pierced her skin, a visible wave of blue-gold aura that exploded outward in concentric rings, washing over the clearing like a benediction and a warning. The sacred fires roared higher, burning the same impossible colors. Viana felt her body changing. Her eyes, she couldn't see them, but felt the transformation. shifted from simple brown to crystalline blue, amber rings forming around her pupils like crowns. Her senses sharpened to supernatural clarity. Strength flooded her limbs, ancient and terrible and intoxicating. When Silas lifted his head, his mark blazed on her throat, a glowing symbol of interlocking crescents and ancient runes that proclaimed her queen to anyone with eyes to see. The mark of the Lycan King's mate, something no living wolf had witnessed in centuries. Kale stared at her from where he'd fallen, and Viana watched the realization crash over him like a physical blow. His face went gray, amber eyes widening with soul-shattering understanding. He'd rejected his fated mate and delivered her directly into the arms of the most powerful being in their world. Everything he'd wanted, power, status, a mate worthy of his ambition, he'd just handed to her while he was left with nothing but Rhiannon's schemes. Silas pulled Viana against his side, his arm around her waist proprietary and protective. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the clearing. The Moon Shadow Pack has dishonored sacred law this night. You have rejected fate, desecrated the goddess's will, and proven yourselves unworthy of her blessing. His eyes swept the assembly, and wolves cowered under that gaze. Remember this moment. Remember what you chose and what you lost. He looked down at Viana, and his expression softened infinitesimally. Come. Your place is no longer here. Viana took one last look at the clearing, at Kale's devastated face, at Rhiannon's shocked rage, at the pack that had cheered her destruction. She felt nothing for them now. The girl who had loved them, who had belonged here, was gone. She turned her back on her former life and walked away with a king, toward an unknown future that burned with blue-gold promise. Chapter 6. The Lycan stronghold rose from the mountain like it had been carved by gods rather than hands, all black stone and impossible angles, ancient beyond measure, radiating power that made the air itself hum. Viana felt dwarfed by it as they approached, felt the weight of centuries pressing down from its towering walls. This wasn't a pack house. This was a fortress that had watched empires rise and fall. Inside, the great hall stretched impossibly vast, lit by flames that burned without fuel in iron sconces. And everywhere, standing along the walls, seated on the dais, emerging from shadowed corridors, were beings that made her wolf instinct scream in confused recognition. Lycans. Ancient, immortal, powerful beyond anything she'd known existed. Their eyes tracked her movement with predatory precision, glowing in the dimness like scattered embers. The whispers started immediately, voices pitched low but perfectly audible to her newly enhanced hearing. A wolf, just a wolf shifter. She bears the mark. How is this possible? She smells of common blood. This cannot be right. Viana's steps faltered, but Silas's hand at the small of her back was steady, unyielding. He guided her forward to the center of the hall, to a raised dais where two thrones sat, one occupied by shadows, one waiting empty. "This is Viana," Silas announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space. "My fated mate. Your queen." The shock rippled through the assembly like a physical wave. Viana felt their scrutiny intensify, felt them searching for something in her that would explain this impossibility. All they found was a young wolf shifter still wearing the simple dress she'd chosen for a ceremony in another life. She could smell their contempt, poorly concealed behind formal neutrality. A young Lycan stepped forward from the crowd, beautiful and cruel, with silver eyes that gleamed with challenge. "She is unworthy of the title." His voice rang clear, fearless. "A common wolf bearing the Queen's mark is an insult to this court, to our bloodlines, to everything we are." The temperature in the hall dropped 10 degrees. Silas moved with speed that defied physics, crossing the distance before Viana could draw breath. His power slammed into the young Lycan like a hammer, forcing him to his knees with such violence that the stone cracked beneath him. The challenger's face contorted in agony, his body bowing under dominance so absolute it left no room for resistance. "You will apologize," Silas said, each word edged with lethal promise. You will grovel before your queen, or I will teach you what happens to those who insult what is mine. Silas, please. Viana's voice cut through the tension, surprising herself with its steadiness. She stepped forward, feeling every eye in the hall lock onto her. Let him speak. Let him say what others are thinking. Silas turned to look at her, something fierce and possessive blazing in his amber eyes. But beneath it, she saw the question, was she certain? She nodded. The pressure released fractionally, enough for the young Lycan to gasp for breath. But before he could speak again, Silas moved back to Viana's side, his arm sliding around her waist with unmistakable possession. Understand this, Silas said, addressing the entire court now. She is my mate, chosen by fate itself. She will never kneel again. Not to anyone in this court, not to anyone in this world. You will respect her, or you will answer to me. His eyes swept the assembly, promising violence to anyone who tested him. And I promise you, my patience for insults to my queen is non-existent. Viana felt the fierce protection radiating from him, felt it in the bond that pulsed between them like a living thing. And for the first time in her life, perhaps for the first time ever, she felt truly safe. Not because she was hidden or overlooked, but because someone powerful enough to make the world bend had chosen to stand beside her. Chapter 7. The weeks blurred together in a cascade of overwhelming sensations that left Viana reeling. Her body was changing in ways she couldn't control, senses sharpening to supernatural clarity where she could hear conversations 3 floors below, strength surging through her limbs until she accidentally shattered a stone pitcher just by gripping it too tightly. Power moved under her skin like a living thing, ancient and wild, responding to emotions she barely understood. Through it all, Silas was there. Not hovering, not controlling, but present through the bond that connected them. She felt him like a steady flame in the back of her mind, warm and constant. When the power threatened to overwhelm her, his presence anchored her. When doubt crept in during sleepless nights, his certainty bled through the connection, reminding her she wasn't alone. Tonight, Viana stood on one of the fortress's high balconies, wrapped in furs against the mountain wind, staring up at stars that seemed close enough to touch. The harvest moon had waned to nothing and been reborn, marking the passage of time in her new life. But she still felt caught between worlds, no longer the girl she'd been, not yet comfortable in the queen she was becoming. You're thinking too loudly. Silas's voice came from behind her, tinged with dry amusement. Viana turned to find him emerging from the shadows, moving with that predatory grace that still made her heart skip. He wore simple dark clothing tonight, no crown or formal regalia, looking more like a warrior than a king. I didn't mean to disturb you through the bond, she said softly. You didn't disturb me. You never could. He moved to stand beside her at the balcony's edge, close enough that she felt his warmth against the wind. For a long moment, they stood in companionable silence, watching the stars will overhead. Do you regret it? Viana asked finally, the question she'd been holding back for weeks. The bond, claiming me, all of this? Silas turned to look at her, amber eyes reflecting starlight. Never. The word was absolute. He reached out, taking her hand in his much larger one. Warmth flooded through the bond, deliberate and comforting. Do you know what I saw when I looked at you that night? Viana shook her head. Power. His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending sparks of sensation up her arm. Ancient bloodlines awakening. You carry Lycan nobility in your veins, Viana. Your ancestors were among the first of our kind, before the bloodlines diverged, before wolves and Lycans became separate. He turned her hand over, studying it as if reading secrets written in her skin. Your family forgot, or perhaps they were forced to hide it generations ago. But I recognized what you were the moment I saw you. I don't understand, Viana whispered. I was nothing in Moonshadow. Just another wolf. You were never a common wolf. Silas's voice held fierce conviction. The world simply refused to see what was in front of them. They were blind, limited by their small hierarchies and smaller imaginations. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that made her breath catch. "But I see you, Viana. I have always seen you." The attraction that had been building between them, something deeper than the bond, more personal than destiny, flared bright and undeniable. Viana felt it echo through their connection, felt his response to her quickening pulse, her parted lips. Silas stepped closer, his free hand rising to cup her face. "You are magnificent," he murmured, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "And every day you become more so." The distance between them evaporated. Viana's eyes fluttered closed as Silas lowered his head, his breath warm against her lips. "My king!" A voice shattered the moment. They turned to find a messenger in the doorway, breathing hard, urgency written across his features. "Forgive the intrusion, but urgent news has arrived from Moonshadow territory." Silas's expression went carefully neutral, though Viana felt frustration ripple through the bond. "Speak." The messenger's eyes flicked to Viana nervously. "It concerns the Queen, Your Majesty. An accusation has been made." Chapter 8. The great hall filled with Lycans within minutes, summoned by the gravity in Silas's voice. Viana stood beside his throne, her stomach churning with dread as a neutral messenger, bearing the colors of no pack, sworn to deliver accusations without bias, stepped forward with a sealed scroll. "An anonymous accusation has been made against Queen Viana Greymark," the messenger announced, his voice echoing through the vast space. "Delivered through proper channels, requiring formal response under ancient law." Silas's royal advisor, a silver-haired Lycan named Valerius, took the scroll and broke the seal. His expression darkened as he read, eyes flicking to Viana with something that looked disturbingly like suspicion. "Read it aloud," Silas commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. Valerius cleared his throat. The rejection at the bonding ceremony was staged performance. Viana Hale and Kale of Moonshadow conspired together, knowing the Lycan King would be present as honored observer. He paused, the silence in the hall absolute. The plan: have Kale reject her publicly, knowing such desecration would draw the king's attention. Viana would secure the king's bond, gaining access to the Lycan court. Viana's blood turned to ice. "No, this wasn't possible." "The accusation continues," Valerius said grimly. "Viana and Kale meet secretly in the borderlands between territories. They plot to assassinate the king and claim the Lycan throne, uniting wolf packs under their rule." He held up additional pages. Testimonies included. Witnesses claim to have seen them together. Locations, dates, times. The court erupted in shocked murmurs. Viana felt their eyes on her like physical blows, their contempt now seemingly justified. The common wolf had been a spy all along. "Lies," Viana breathed, then louder. "These are lies." Silas said nothing. His face had transformed into unreadable stone, amber eyes cold and distant as he took the documents from Valerius. He read them slowly, methodically, while Viana's heart hammered against her ribs. Through the bond, that connection that had been so warm, so constant, she felt only cold pressure. Doubt. Uncertainty. He was questioning her. The realization hit like a physical blow. After everything, after the bond, after his fierce declarations of protection, he was actually considering this poisoned fiction might be truth. "Silas," she whispered, reaching for him through the bond. He looked at her then, and his eyes were those of a king, not a mate. "You felt the bond with him first," he said, each word carefully measured. "For 3 years. Were you loyal to him, Viana? When I claimed you, was part of you still his?" The question shattered something in her chest. This was Kale all over again, someone she'd trusted, someone she'd begun to love, looking at her with doubt and suspicion. The familiar humiliation crashed over her. Would she always be found wanting? Would everyone eventually decide she wasn't enough? "You think I would," her voice broke. "After what he did to me, you think I would conspire with him?" "I think you're young," Silas said, his tone infuriatingly calm. I think you felt a bond with him long before you knew I existed. I think grief and rejection can drive people to desperate acts. He set the documents down with deliberate care. I think I need to be certain. Viana felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of this court that already despised her. Ancient law requires public trial when accusations of treason are made against royalty, Silas announced, addressing the court now rather than her. The accused has the right to face their accusers, to present defense, to have truth witnessed by all parties. He stood, every inch the immortal king, terrible and beautiful and utterly untouchable. I hereby summon Alpha Theron of Moonshadow Pack, Kale of Moonshadow, and Rhiannon Hale to appear before this court. The trial will be held at the bonding grounds where the alleged conspiracy began. His eyes found Viana's one last time, and she searched desperately for warmth, for trust, for anything that said he believed her. But all she saw was cold justice. Take the queen to her chambers, Silas ordered. Under guard. Until the trial. The word echoed in Viana's mind as guards stepped forward. Prisoner. She'd become a prisoner in the home that was supposed to be hers. Chapter 9. The journey back to Moonshadow territory felt like traveling through a nightmare made manifest. Viana rode beside Silas, close enough to touch yet separated by a chasm of doubt that yawned wider with each passing mile. The bond between them, once warm and constant, now felt muted, as if he deliberately pulled back, building walls she couldn't breach. He spoke only when necessary, his face an unreadable mask of royal neutrality. Guards surrounded them, both Lycan and Wolf, a formal procession befitting a trial rather than a homecoming. Viana felt like a prisoner being paraded to execution. They arrived at the bonding grounds as the sun set, and Viana's breath caught despite everything. The sacred space looked exactly as it had that devastating night, the same ancient stones marking the circle's boundary, the same ceremonial braziers waiting to be lit, the same full moon rising over the trees. The harvest moon, completing its cycle. She'd left here broken and dying. She was returning transformed, powerful, marked as a queen. But perhaps just as condemned. The gathered packs filled the clearing, Moonshadow wolves arranged in their hierarchies, visiting packs who'd witnessed the original ceremony, Lycans from Silas's court standing apart with predatory stillness. Everyone who'd seen her destruction had come to witness her potential execution. Silas strode to the center of the circle, power radiating from him like heat from a forge. Here, we will have truth under the goddess's eye, he declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the grounds. In this sacred space, let all lies be revealed and all truth be witnessed. Alpha Theron stepped forward first, looking uncomfortable but resolute. Then Kale emerged from the crowd, his face haggard, eyes haunted by ghosts of his own making. And finally, Rhiannon, beautiful and composed, wearing grief like a perfectly tailored gown. My king, Rhiannon said, her voice breaking just enough to sound genuine. She pressed a hand to her heart, tears gathering in her eyes. I come before you with the heaviest of hearts. To accuse my own sister. She paused, letting a sob escape. But I cannot let blood loyalty blind me to treason. Viana watched the performance with sick fascination. Her sister had always been talented at manipulation, but this was mastery. I discovered these hidden in our family home, Rhiannon continued, producing a bundle of letters with trembling hands. In Viana's old room, concealed beneath a floorboard. She handed them to Silas with the reverence of someone delivering evidence of the gravest crime. Letters between her and Kale, planning everything. The rejection, the bonding to me, drawing your attention to claim her. Silas examined the letters, his expression unreadable. Viana caught glimpses of the handwriting, her handwriting, or an expert forgery of it. Her stomach twisted. I have witnesses, Rhiannon said, gesturing to several wolves who stepped forward. Travelers who saw Viana and Kale meeting in the borderlands. 3 separate occasions. Always in secret. Always alone. One by one, the witnesses testified, describing locations, times, details that painted a damning picture. Vianna meeting Kale under the cover of darkness. Hushed conversations. Urgent whispers about the plan and when the time is right. The pack was listening, believing. Vianna could see it in their faces, the way the narrative took hold. It made sense, didn't it? The overlooked wolf suddenly becoming queen through convenient tragedy. Why wouldn't it be a scheme? Even some of the Lycans looked convinced, their earlier contempt transforming into something more dangerous, vindication. They'd known she was unworthy. Here was the proof. Silas's eyes swept the assembly before finally landing on Vianna. The weight of his gaze was crushing, judicial, revealing nothing of the man who'd kissed her knuckles under starlight just days ago. What say you to these accusations, Queen Vianna? The title sounded like mockery now, provisional and temporary. Every eye in the clearing turned to her. The pack that had cheered her destruction. The sister who'd orchestrated it. The mate who'd thrown her away. And the king who might be about to do the same. Vianna stood alone in the center of the circle where she'd once collapsed broken and dying, and opened her mouth to defend herself against lies wrapped in perfect truth. Chapter 10. Every word is a lie. Vianna's voice rang clear across the clearing, steadier than she felt. I have never conspired with Kale. I have never met him in secret. These letters are forgeries, and those witnesses have been paid or deceived. Rhiannon's expression showed perfect, wounded disbelief. Sister, please. Enough. Silas's single word cut through the night like a blade. He turned to the shadows at the clearing's edge. Bring him forward. An elderly man emerged, escorted by Lycan guards, hunched with age, but with eyes sharp as broken glass. He wore the stained apron of someone who worked with his hands, ink permanently embedded under his fingernails. This is Master Corvius, Silas announced. The finest forge master in 3 territories. An expert in inks, papers, and the art of written deception. He gestured to the letters Rhiannon had produced. I sent these to him 3 days ago. Tell us what you found. Corvius took one of the letters with careful hands, holding it to the firelight. The handwriting is excellent forgery, nearly perfect. But the ink. He looked directly at Rhiannon. This particular formulation, nightshade base mixed with iron gall and moonflower extract, is rare. Very rare. In fact, it's only produced in 1 location in this territory. The clearing held its breath. The former Luna's personal chambers, Corvius continued. Your mother's private workspace, Lady Rhiannon. Where she kept her correspondence materials under lock and key. Confusion flickered across Rhiannon's face, quickly masked. That proves nothing. Vianna could have accessed. The surveillance report, Silas interrupted, producing a document from his coat. His eyes were cold amber fire. Kale has been under discreet observation since the bonding ceremony. Standard procedure for all parties involved in sacred law violations. He unrolled the parchment. According to my watchers, Kale has not left Moonshadow Packlands alone once since that night. Not once. He's been confined to Pack House grounds under Alpha Theron's orders. Alpha Theron nodded grimly. After the desecration, I couldn't allow him free movement. He's been under constant watch. So these secret meetings in the borderlands, Silas said softly, dangerously, occurred when exactly? One of the witnesses, a thin wolf with nervous eyes, suddenly broke. She paid me. He pointed at Rhiannon with a trembling hand. She gave me her mother's jewelry, a silver necklace with moonstone. Told me exactly what to say, when to say it. You fool. Rhiannon hissed, her careful mask cracking. The timeline is impossible, Silas continued relentlessly. The meetings couldn't have happened. The ink proves the letters were forged in your chambers, Rhiannon. The witness admits he was paid. Your entire accusation is a fabrication. You weren't supposed to survive. The words exploded from Rhiannon like venom, her composure shattering completely. The broken bond should have killed you. Common wolves don't survive fated bond rejections, they die within hours. Her beautiful face twisted with rage and desperation. But he had to interfere, had to claim you, had to ruin everything. The clearing erupted in shocked murmurs, but Rhiannon was beyond caring now, beyond control. It worked on Kale, she continued, voice rising hysterically. Months of careful manipulation, planting doubts, making him question the bond. Making him see you as weak, as beneath him. It was perfect. He rejected you. I secured the beta position. Everything was supposed to end there. She turned wild eyes on Silas. But you made her queen. You gave the pathetic, overlooked nothing, everything I deserved. So I tried again, the same tactics, the same manipulation. It was supposed to work on you. The confession hung in the air like poison gas. Vianna felt something break and remake itself inside her chest, not pain this time, but vindication sharp as broken glass. Kale stared at Rhiannon with dawning, devastating horror. You manipulated me? Everything I felt, everything I thought about Vianna being weak, that was you. You were so easy, Rhiannon sneered, all pretense gone. So ambitious, so eager to believe you deserved better than fate's choice. I destroyed my fated mate. Kale's voice was hollow, broken. I rejected destiny, violated sacred law, because you twisted my mind. He looked at Rhiannon with something beyond hatred, utter revulsion. You destroyed everything. You are nothing to me. Less than nothing. Rhiannon's triumph curdled to ash, her eyes going wide as she realized what she'd done. She destroyed herself with her own confession, before the goddess and every witness. Silas's gaze finally found Vianna's, and the cold doubt was gone, replaced by fierce regret and burning pride. Through the bond, warmth flooded back, apology, trust, absolute certainty. He'd never doubted. This had been a trap, and Rhiannon had walked into it perfectly.